Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. This is week number 58, and I thought I should clarify up front this week because I get a lot of questions about coincidence miracles, and it's important that we have this the proper understanding, or else we miss all the miracles that we're getting from God throughout the day. So let me explain that not all coincidences are miracles, obviously, but many of them are. So the coincidences are to get our attention. And when we see a coincidence, very often if we stop and think about why is it happening and what are we doing, we notice that we were hoping that God would do something, or we prayed to God for something, some help with something, or we were just in our minds saying, I'm having a lot of stress and problems with this, God help me, just a simple invocation like that. So that's normally what will happen. We see a coincidence. If it's a miracle, there's going to be something around it to indicate that we were thinking with or thinking about God, or something good and holy to do. So let me give you some examples, because in the Bible, there's a lot of examples in the Bible where people could say, wow, that was a coincidence, what a coincidence that was, etc. Many stories. Let me give you one very significant one. In the book of Genesis, chapter 24, we're told in the Bible that Abraham sent his servant to go and find a wife for his son Isaac. And he trusts his servant very much, obviously, because he sends him off to find a wife for his son, which is not a small matter. And it's in Genesis chapter 24, so you can read it. It's a beautiful story. But the bottom line is that the servant goes off. It sounds like it was maybe a week or more of a trip, a journey for him to go to a certain place to find a wife. He was told where to go. And it sounded like it took about a week or more to go there. But when he gets there, he prays to God, and he tells God that he's expecting that he's going to go to the well when the women come out in the afternoon to get water. They have typical times where they do certain chores. And he's telling God, praying to God and saying, I'll ask a woman to give me some water, and if the woman I ask for water, if she says, would you like me to also get water for your camels, then that'll be the clue for me that that's the woman that you want me to pick for my master's son Isaac. And sure enough, that's what happens. He sees Rebekah. Apparently she was extremely beautiful, according to what the Bible says. And he noticed her right away, and I guess he felt she would be a wonderful wife for Isaac. So he asks her if she would give him some water while she's getting water from the well. And immediately, without delay, she says, yes, and would you like me to also get water for your camels? And so this was a coincidence. Most people, listening to the story would say, wow, what a coincidence that was, except that we know that the servant asked God to help this come about, because the servant wanted God's help, and the servant wanted God to show him which woman to pick. So that's an example of how a coincidence would tell us, gee, maybe there's more to this than just a mere coincidence, and we would investigate, and we'd find out. If we talked to the servant, he would say, oh yes, I did pray. Another example is in the New Testament now. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus sends Peter and John into town. He tells them to go into town and prepare the upper room for the Last Supper. And he tells them that you'll go into town and you'll see a man carrying a water jar. Follow that man who's carrying the water jar. Follow him, and he'll enter a place and enter a room, and you can then tell him that I have sent you to prepare the upper room for the Passover feast. So John and Peter walk off to go to town. It's certainly a journey. It takes a while. It's not really nearby. And when they get there, they just happen to see this man carrying a water jar. And many people would say again, wow, what a coincidence. These two guys come into town and they're looking for somebody carrying a water jar, and right away, as soon as they come in, there's a man carrying a water jar. So you see, these things look like coincidences, and then if you talk to people about it, if you talk to the guy carrying the water jar, or if you talk to John and Peter, they would tell you, well, Jesus said to come and do that. And then you find out it's an intervention of God. I mean, if Jesus said to do it, Jesus is God incarnate, so that's God in Jesus. God decided to become a man, but not just suddenly become a man at the age of 30. God decided to become a man by actually being within a woman who was pregnant for 9 months, Blessed Virgin Mary. So God became a man in the form of Jesus Christ. And so by Jesus telling us things, it's God, the Spirit of God, in the man Jesus telling us things. And so that, again, is another indication of God doing things that's bringing miracles about. Let me share now a miracle from my own life experience of many steps that would look like coincidences, but if you know the background, you know that it's a miracle. I was driving on a state highway about an hour's drive from my house. I was on an errand, and I had a problem with one of my teeth, and I had a broken tooth, and I was driving by on the main highway, driving by my dentist's office. So I was inspired. I had a thought, look, why don't you just pop in and see if he can take care of this for you, just pulling off the road and do that. Well, most people would say that's silly. You can't do that with a dentist. But I was inspired to do it, so I did. I followed through on it and drove over to the dentist's office. And when I pulled into the driveway, I saw a car pulling out, and the car passed me. It was coming out as I was coming in. I think I wound up taking its parking place. And the license plate on the car coming out was G, the letter G, like the letter G for God, 77. Those were the things on the license plate. At the end of the number, there were other numbers, and then the last three things were G77. So I saw that, and I know from studying numbers over the last 50 years and seeing many miracles with them, that means G is the seventh letter, so G77 means 777, which is the holiest number in history. 3 sixes is the number for the devil, and 3 sevens is the number for God throughout history, even hundreds of years before Jesus was born. So I was feeling bright about that. I took a chance, came into the driveway, going to see the dentist, and I see 3 sevens on the way in. So I went inside, and When I went to the receptionist and told her, she said, let me check, and turned out that they had just gotten a cancellation, and she said, if you can just wait about 10 minutes, we can get you in, because there was a cancellation, and it works out perfectly. That was fantastic. So there's another coincidence. You see the coincidences of the license plate on the way in, and now the receptionist happens to have an opening as I walk in the door precisely at the time I'm walking in. And while I was waiting the 10 minutes in the reception area, I was inspired to hand out cards about the 2 books I wrote, Coincidence Miracles. And as I typically do, I ask people when I hand them cards, do they have any coincidence miracles they can share with me? And one of the men in the reception area was delighted to tell me. He said, oh yeah, he said, I've had many miracles in my life, and 2 things stand out in my life very vividly. And I said, please, would you mind sharing them? I won't mention your name, but I'd like to tell other people about other people's miracles. He said, sure, I wouldn't mind. Turns out he was a young man when he was very, very young. He didn't know how to swim, but he was out in a canoe. Young boys will be boys. He took the canoe out on the lake, and he didn't know how to swim. And while he was out there, it capsized. But it turned out that there was somebody very nearby that got over to him very quickly and saved his life. And it was a tremendous miracle story, and many people, especially his parents, communicated to him that it was indeed a miracle. He could have died if the stranger was not there. And then he told me about the second one that's very profound. He was working 2 shifts at his job, and he was working 2 shifts for a long time. He was pretty exhausted. So he got a break where he could catch up on some sleep, and so he went into some deep sleep. He tells me that when he's in deep sleep, nothing, even the alarm doesn't wake him up. And lo and behold, in the middle of the night, it sounded like maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, he awoke, and he opened his eyes, and his drapes in his bedroom, his drapes were on fire. I think he had an electrical heater, as I recall, and the assumption is that it caught fire because it was close to the drapes. So let's summarize all this, okay? I'm on a highway driving back home. I'm going by a dentist's office. I'm inspired to pull in and see if I can get an appointment. Sure enough, I get one. I see G77 on the way in. I meet a man who just happens to be in the reception area who has 2 fantastic miracles to share that he's very much aware of. And he also explained to me how both of those things do keep him aware of God during his life whenever he's having problems. Those 2 episodes in his life tells him that God did intervene in his life and woke him up for the fire and had someone there available to save him. And then as I was on the way home, I got inspired to take the long way, the more scenic route to get home. And sometimes God does that. I never know why. I just follow his inspiration. So I took the longer scenic route, and that took longer, delayed the time span. I got home, maybe 10 minutes later than I would have gotten otherwise. Well, the last stop sign, just before I got to my driveway, the very last stop sign, I stopped at the red stop sign, and a car coming through toward me, its license plate number was 777. And that told me that Jesus was reminding me at the end of my trip, because I went the long way. He gave me this gift because I went the long way. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen it. And he was reminding me that I had seen 3 sevens at the dentist's office as well. So that's how God works, with these little clues. And then he reminds us in our mind of why we're getting the clues. And that's what we need to do. Look for all your coincidences, and notice how God is planting all these seeds all day long. And all these coincidences add up and give you proof, absolute proof, that God is working within your life. And that's why I keep stressing, keep looking for coincidences, and you'll see how God is working with all the minutiae, all the tiny things, to bless you all day long. All right? God bless you all. I will talk to you again next week.